Hello friends, welcome to week 29 of Samachar Manthan lecture series. So basically this time there have been certain landmark reports which have been introduced. So let's start with economics first. So basically the World Inequality Report was released by the World Inequality Lab which is based in Paris, and Thomas Piketty plays a very important role in releasing these reports. Have you heard about this person, Thomas Piketty? Read his book whenever you are free after giving mains next year. His book was Capital in the 21st Century, and he talks about that how in last 30-40 years the inequality, the core reason behind inequality and how you can avoid that. So it's a very good book. So it will also give you a lot of fodder for your essay paper and also for your GS3 paper, and you'll have an understanding of how the neoliberal economic model works in the world. So it's a very good book. You can read about that. Now, this World Inequality Report, it has brought out some shocking facts about India, and we will be discussing this topic of inequality in India in detail. So ultimately, it talks about 7 indicators of India. So first indicator is, and these are all important statistics which are also important for your mains exam perspective, because you can use the data here in your answers. If a question is asked on poverty, inequality, anything, you can use the data which I'll be sharing here. So the first issue they highlighted was income divide in India, or income inequality in India. So the report said that top 10% Indians in India, they have a total control over 57% of the national income. What is the difference between income and wealth? No, but that is, you are talking about the technical thing. Difference between income and wealth. Now, income is basically if you are providing any goods and services to any person, and in return you are getting a income or money. That is what we call as income, right? Suppose you don't provide any services, but you have a apartment which you have kept on rent. So the rental amount that you will get is also income, right? Wealth is the net value of you. Let's say you have a plot in Noida which is worth 2 crores, 1 crore, right? And you also have taken loan from a bank, and the loan amount is, let's say, 50 lakh. So your net wealth is how much? 1 crore minus 50 lakh. Asset minus liability. So wealth is your overall value. Income is something which you get every month or every 3 months or every 6 months, right? So ultimately, if we talk of income, top 10% in India has a control over 57% of national income in India, and top 1% has control over 22% of India's national income. Okay. Similarly, the bottom 50% in India, bottom or the poorest 50% in India, has a control over just 13% of the national income, which is very less. Similarly, the second thing which it highlighted was decline in public wealth. And can anybody tell the reason behind that? Yes, privatization. Since government is selling the PSUs and all over the world, and especially in India, therefore the public wealth has been reducing in India. Plus, because government is going for fiscal expansion, that is why it is also taking loan from the private sector. So because of that, public wealth in India has been reducing over last few years. Similarly, inequality, if we compare inequality during the colonial period, it has actually so when India was being ruled by the Britishers between 1857 to 1947, the top 10% in India held 50% of the total wealth, 50%. But after independence, because of the socialist policies of the incumbent government, this number fell to 35% by 1991. But since then, after the new economic policy that we had adopted, inequality in India has increased, and now this number is 57%. So technically, inequality has increased in India since 1991, and this is a natural consequence of adopting a market economy. Similarly, when we talk of wealth inequality, this is even worse in India. So if we talk of wealth inequality, technically the data shows that top 10% richest people in India have control over 65% of total wealth in India. 65%. Right? And if we talk about the other sector, so we say that the top 50% or the bottom 50% in India, bottom 50% has just 6% control over the total wealth of India, just 6%, right? And the top 1% owns 31% of the wealth. So technically, you know, we have a, or we are a lower middle income country, but if we deduct these 1%, our per capita income will be equivalent to many countries of sub-Saharan Africa, like Liberia and like, you know, probably Burkina Faso and all, right? You have to just deduct these 1% people, right? Similarly, gender inequality is also there. So basically in India, you have almost 49% female population, and they have just 18% control over the national income of India, just 18%, though this number has improved since 1991. 91 mein the figure was 8%, and now we have moved to 18%. But if we compare it with rest of the world, this number is only more than the Arab countries. Except the Arab countries, we are far behind other countries of Asia, Africa and Europe. Similarly, you have poor states and wealthy populations. So technically, as we know that the state ki jo wealth hai, that has been decreasing. And lastly, there has been issue over the data availability, because last 2 years say countries are not releasing or they are not submitting the data to the agency. Now, if we talk of conclusion from the report, so technically the wealth is mostly inherited in India. Ab Ambani ka pota paida hua, right? The day he was born, he already has a amount of wealth which is more than even all of you can dream of, right? So inheritance की वजह से, you know, देखो एक चीज समझो, ये चीज कि if you get a control over a land, there was one writer in CP or there was one writer in India, Khushwant Singh. He followed his passion all his life. Do you know the reason behind that? Why he was not after money? Because his father, Shobha Singh, he actually brought almost 60% of CP in 1930s and 40s. So can you imagine the rent he will be getting now? One small shop in CP gives you a rent of 5 lakh, 10 lakh per month. And almost 60% shops in CP were owned by Khushwant Singh. So he never had to do anything in his life. And that is why he wrote so many books, because when you're free, that's all you will do, right? So there is a technically, and the reason I'm saying is कि अगर आपको asset मिलता है, its price, its value increases over time. If you get a 100 meter plot, you know, if you will sell after 40-50 years, you'll get almost 50 times more amount for it, right? So that is even worsening inequality in India and in the world. And similarly, the wealth management is necessary. So we are seeing that the public sector की wealth negative होती आ रही है, and this is important and this is also concerning, because long run में, you know, the state has to spend on social sectors like health, education, you know, fighting climate change. For that, it will require some wealth. It should require some money. Now, coming to the Indian context, so why do we have such a huge income inequality in India? So basically, to understand this, we also have to go back to the 1980s and probably even before that. So in economics, you know, when we talk about the modern day economics, which was the first school of thought which was dominant in the economic theory? The first school of thought. Classical. Yes, classicals was the first school of thought which was prevalent in India. और क्लासिकल्स का जो लीडर था, इट वाज एडम स्मिथ, एंड द बेसिक थ्योरी ऑफ द क्लासिकल्स वाज व्हाट? इट वाज laissez-faire, that the country or the government which governs the least is the best optimum type of government. So the basic premise of laissez-faire was that the government has no role in economic activities. The government should only focus on defense and foreign policy. Economy should be left to the market forces. Then we had the 1929 Great Depression. And the Great Depression technically, or it exposed the weaknesses of the classical model, and therefore a new school of thought emerged in 1930s, which was the Keynesian thought, right? The Keynesian thought was propagated by George Maynard Keynes, who was a British economist. So when American economy was technically declining throughout the first half of the 30th century, because what they did was that they believe that this crash is a temporary activity and the market will correct itself. But the market, the market did not correct itself. And finally, Keynes advised the then president of USA, Franklin Roosevelt, that you have to intervene, the government will have to intervene, because there is no demand in the economy. And because there is no demand in the economy, the market will not be able to correct itself. So you have to create an artificial demand in the economy by doing expenditure, right? So therefore, Roosevelt came up with New Deal, which talked about that we will spend money on building roads, building railway lines, building ports. And when you will spend money on that, what will it do? It will generate employment. And when people will get their job back, they will start consuming, they will start spending money. And that is how economy will be revived back. So, in matter of 3, 4, 5 years, US economy, was brought into the track. And therefore, from 1930s till the end of 1970s, the Keynesian thought was the dominant thought across the whole world, be it the capitalist countries, be it the Western countries. All of these countries realize that government has an important role in economic matters. And therefore, the whole concept of welfare state emerged in 1940s. What do you mean by the term welfare state? Welfare state is a state which takes care of certain, or it's a kind of a state where the state takes care of certain activities like education, like health, like providing social security to the old age people, right? So it's a kind of a state, or it's a kind of a system where the government takes care of its people, right? So it's somewhere between the pure capitalist state and the pure communist state. So majority of the countries, or majority of the Western countries, adopted the welfare state model after the World War II. But then by the end of 1970s, technically there was what we call as stagflation in the whole Western world. Stagflation means संधि विच्छेद है, break करो इसको. When the growth is also declining and the inflation is also rising. Usually in a recession, what do we expect? The prices are lower because there is no demand in the economy. But stagflation is a very peculiar situation where at the same time the economic growth is stagnant and the prices are still rising. So the world was facing that, and therefore a new dominant school of thought emerged, and that was propagated by this person, Hayek. So Hayek technically, introduced a new school of economic thought which we call as neoliberalism. Neoliberalism economic model. And two leaders, one from USA, Reagan, and one from UK, Thatcher, both of them technically believe that this actually has, or he has a point. So both Reagan and Thatcher adopted the neoliberal economic policies from early 1980s. The word neoliberal, the word neo means new, and liberal means, as we all know, a more free economy. So technically, the neoliberal model was based on the fundamentals of the classicals, that the government should have no role in the economy. So it propagated that we should go for deregulation, complete deregulation, which means government should have no control over any sector. Let the market force decide what is good for the people. It also propagated privatization, which means those areas which are governed by the government or the PSUs, they should be sold to the private sector. And it also propagated low taxes. Since it says that the role of government is very limited, so therefore there is no need of taxes in the economy. So you should go for low taxes, right? Now this model of neoliberalism was finally also adopted by India in 1991 at a basic level. But this neoliberal model is actually responsible for increase in income inequality in the world. अब उससे हुआ क्या कि 81 के बाद से if we see the data, जो capitalist है, the profits of the capitalist has been rising with time, but the real income of the labor has been stagnant over the years. So the gap between the capitalist and the working class has been increasing since last 40 years. That is why, if you guys remember, I think 6, 7, 8 years back, there was this whole movement which emerged in USA, the Occupy Wall Street movement, in which the common people of USA raised the slogan that we the 99%, we are the 99% whose wages have been stagnant for last 40 years, and these 1% capitalists, they are technically, their income has been rising and the gap has been increasing. अब इसका एक consequence भी है, right? What is the biggest consequence of this inequality? The biggest consequence of this inequality is that when 99% of your population, they are also what? They are also consumers. They are also consumers. When 99% people's income will not rise, the demand will also be stagnant in the economy. 1% super rich cannot really, push the economy to a higher limit, because how much will these 1% consume, right? If 99% people will have their real income same, then they will be also stagnancy in demand in the economy, and that is also reflecting in the fact that the growth rate of majority of these developed countries, they are not, they're not very high from last 30-40 years, right? So this neoliberalism played a very important role in technically ensuring that inequality remains in the world. Now, if we talk of India as such, so India ki kuch specific factors bhi the. For example, we had this, what we did after independence was that we focused on the higher education sector. So IITs, yes, it is technically adoption of classical theory in modern times, right? So its premise is same, laissez-faire. The government should not do anything in regulating the economy. Market will correct itself, right? But now, since 2008, neoliberal economic model is time पे आया करिए यार आप लोग. Neoliberal economic model is technically in vain. Also, one more thing which the neoliberal economic model pushed was globalization. Globalization was also one of the premise of the neoliberal model कि भाई जहां पे भी सबसे सस्ती चीज पैदा हो रही है वहां से खरीदो, right? Since 2008, what happened in 2008? Global financial crisis. Since 2008, we are again somehow moving towards Keynesianism. So Keynes is basically the Keynesian idea is basically it gains its favor mostly in crisis, right? So 2008 के बाद the US went for this fiscal stimulus package, India went for the same thing, and almost every country in the world went for the fiscal stimulus where the government started spending more money. And it's just it's just very close to what Keynes advised, right? So we are again, and also we are also moving towards deglobalization, because US also realized, see हुआ क्या, जब न्यू लिबरल इकोनॉमिक मॉडल आया तो ग्लोबलाइजेशन आया. ग्लोबलाइजेशन से क्या हुआ कि जो कैपिटलिस्ट क्लास था यूएस का, उसको ये लगा कि भाई rather than hiring these people in America, let me shift my back office to either India or China or other countries, because there the labor is cheap. So technically the American workforce lost its bargaining capability, because if they would ask for more, they said ठीक है हम आपसे काम ही नहीं करेंगे, we'll shift to India, Philippines, Vietnam, we have so many alternatives, right? So उससे हुआ क्या, कैपिटलिस्ट का प्रॉफिट तो बढ़ता गया, because of globalization he found avenue for cheap labor. But the working class, because they lost their bargaining capability, their income did not increase. And the reason why Trump came to power was because of the same sentiments. The American white people, working class white people, he technically addressed to that core concern of these workers, that your job is being exported to countries of Asia and I will stop that. And that's why he said, I will make America great again, that all these working class jobs will remain in America, right? So that is how, Trump, and it's not about that Trump talked nonsense and that is why Americans voted for him. It's a much more educated, they are much more educated people. They know democracy much more. They voted for him not out of racism. They voted out of him because he addressed the core agenda of the American people, right? And also, secondly, natural सी बात है, जिस country में unfiltered immigration होता है, the natives do, respond, right? We have same sentiments in India also, in Assam and other places. In the last lecture we discussed about Tripura also. So it's the same kind of sentiments even the American people had, that all these people from Latin America, Mexico and all, they are coming here, and technically in some years we would be a minority, because already in USA the Hispanic people or the people from Latin America, they are almost 30% of the population. So if this unfiltered migration takes place in probably 10, 15, 20 years, the white Americans will be in minority. So that concern was also there, and that concern was also kind of highlighted by Trump also. So if we talk of India, में हमने focus किया कहाँ पे? We focused on higher education, IITs, IIMs, etc. Unlike the East Asian model, where these countries focused on basic education at mass level. Basic education. So, after 1981, when we adopted the liberalization model, we had a pool of highly skilled engineers, IT professionals and all. But for manufacturing, you require semi-skilled people at mass level. And we did not have that, because only 1% or 2% people in India had got any kind of vocational education. So therefore, 91 LPG reforms के बाद, India moved towards being a service-led economy. And even in service-led economy, India's growth was led by 2-3 sectors: IT, telecom, financial services. All of them were not great employers. IT sector just employed 2 million people in India. Only the manufacturing sector had the capability of employing in masses, in bulk. But because manufacturing sector जो है वो इंडिया में नहीं grow कर पाया, because of labor laws, because of this policy of focusing on higher education, therefore inequality in India worsened after 1991. Because those who were part of these privileged sectors, their income significantly increased. But those who were not part of these privileged sectors, their income somehow remained stagnant, right? And that is why we saw that 10% people who had control over 35% wealth in 1981 now have control over 57% of the national income. ठीक है? इसके अलावा one other reason why we had inequality were social factors, and the biggest reason was caste. The caste in India, plus also we have this habit of not migrating to faraway places. Even though we have good opportunities, we still prefer कि भाई ठीक है कम पैसा मिल रहा है, घर के पास रहना है. So all these social reasons were also responsible for inequality. Because we all know, right, we have discussed in the last lecture also that how from the green revolution the OBC communities benefited, but the Dalits remain the same. So the gap between the OBC communities and the Dalits also increased in last 30-40 years. Again, this is also one reason behind the income inequality in India. ठीक है. Moving on to the concerns associated with inequalities in India, let's discuss that now. So basically, one basic concern that we have is normalization of inequalities. So basically, many economists are of the view that inequality is a natural consequence of rapid economic growth. This theory is also very a mainstream theory that when a country grows rapidly, inequality is a byproduct of that. And therefore, we should not be concerned about that, because during the course of time or with course of time, this number will start falling. And anybody who questions that viewpoint is tagged as socialist by these mainstream economists. And also one more thing is that ultimately, you know, when we talk of inequality, there are certain underprivileged sectors whose condition even worsens more. For example, the women, the Dalits, the tribals, the minorities, the handicaps, right? Also, it somehow, or it has been leading to creation of monopolies in the world. And we have a very good example of that in India. Can anybody name? Almost a monopoly now. Jio. And it's not just in India, right? Everywhere in the world, we are seeing that the competition has been reducing, because there has been, see, all over the world, crony capitalism is an order of a day. Those industries which are close to the incumbent government, they are getting all the contracts, everything, and therefore with course of time what we are seeing is that in those sectors जहाँ पे 5-6 लोग थे, अब वहाँ पे 2-3 बचे हैं, and with course of time we'll only see one person. So that is also a problem thing, because see, ultimately now nobody can compete with Ambani, right? Nobody can compete with Ambani. Even the Wipros and the other people, you know, the gap has increased so much that in course of time nobody will have the capability to compete with them, right? And that will then lead to creation, or that will lead to creation of monopolies in future. Similarly, it also produces unsustainable economic growth. Why unsustainable? Because it creates demand crisis in the economy. So the economy will always be prone to ups and downs, right? And also we need to understand this thing, that the marginal propensity to consume, MPC, of the poorer section is more than the richer section. So if a poorer section earns 100 rupees, he spends 95 rupees. If a rich section earns 100 rupees, he spends 30 rupees, 40 rupees. So when the poorer sections will become more poorer, there will be overall demand crisis in the economy, right? And also inequalities will also lead to social conflict, and that is happening in India itself. You are seeing these dominant castes asking for reservation. Why? Why are we seeing that? Because those castes which have remained, or जो castes land based caste है, because land की with every generation, you know, there is क्या हो रहा है, 4 में बट रही है, 6 में बट रही है, 3 में बट रही है, लैंड की वैल्यू कम होती है, साइज कम होता जा रहा है, right? And there is hardly any income that you can generate from agriculture activities now. And they then see these urban communities who are earning so high. So that is why they have also started asking for reservations. So all these Jats, Patidars, the Reddis, Marathas, all these are landed class, landed caste. And because of the growing dichotomy between the agriculture sector and the non-agriculture sector, their situation has been reducing, and because of that they are asking for these caste based reservation, etc. Okay. Similarly, we have also seen that throughout India, many regions in India, especially Northeast में जो पूरी insurgency movement थी, one basic reason was unequal distribution. Since we are now enjoying 50 years of Bangladesh independence, yes, there were other reasons, there were ethnic reasons, but along with that, one basic reason why the East Pakistani people revolted was because there was no equal sharing of resources. According to World Bank estimate, 90% of the national income was spent on West Pakistan. Only 10% of that was spent on East Pakistan, even though the population of East Pakistan was more than the population of the West Pakistan. So East Pakistani people felt like we are a colony of West Pakistan. So that was also the economic reasons were also there. The economic inequality was also one reason why they revolted against the West Pakistani rule. ठीक है ना? Also, it is detrimental to public healthcare and education because when you have inequality in a country, let's say you have a middle class and you have the rich section who are the most vocal. If their earning is more and the poorer sections are very poor, then these people will go for private education and private healthcare, and nobody will demand for good quality of public hospitals and public education. And therefore, government's focus on that will also be reduced because usually the vocal community is the middle class, right? All these movements that we have seen in last 40-50 years, all of them were led by middle class, be it the JP movement, be it the Anna movement, all of them were led by the middle class. So what should be our approach to solving inequality? So I think I have discussed in detail, I think 5 or 6 lectures before about the Nordic economic model, which is technically, which countries are Nordic countries? Norway, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, Iceland. Yes, Iceland. Norway, Sweden, Denmark, then you have the Finland and Iceland. These 5 countries are part of the Nordic model. So what did these Nordic countries do? Nordic countries, they adopted best of capitalism and communism, or what we call as socialism. So these countries, in these countries, the job of production was left to the private sector. Sorry. Private sector will produce and government will play an important role in distribution. So in every social indicators, if you see every report index, it is these countries who are always in the top 10. There's a reason behind that, because these countries impose high taxation on the super rich and the rich people, and that money which they generate, they spend on providing free healthcare, free education. You don't have a concept of private school and private healthcare in these countries. You are a kid of a Ambani or you are a kid of a normal, probably a rickshaw puller, you'll sit in the same schools, you'll get the same health facilities, and also they provide other things like they provide pension system, they also provide you unemployment allowance. So in every way they technically help you, right? Because of that, and also there is an high trust level that we have in these countries. The citizens trust their government, right? They know that whatever they are taxed, that will be only utilized for the welfare of people, that will not be utilized for building statues. So because of that, there is hardly any tax evasion in these countries. People willingly contribute for the national cause, and that is why these Nordic countries, they are in such a good situation with very low inequality level. Then we can also move towards what we call as stakeholder capitalism. Can anybody tell what is stakeholder capitalism? This term was used by the World Economic Forum in 2019. So what kind of capitalism usually exists? If there is a company, for whose benefit does the company operate for? Not really. You are close, but not really. So normally the companies, they operate for the benefit of the shareholders. If I have a share of a company, the managers of the company, the CEO of the company is accountable to me. I am the owner of the company, right? That is how usually a company works. 2019, the World Economic Forum talked about a new concept that we should move away from shareholder capitalism to stakeholder capitalism, which means suppose you are an X who is supplying raw materials to a company. So it is a duty of the company to take care of your interest also. I am a customer of a company. It is a duty of the company to take care of the customer's interest also. Also, since you are getting everything from the society, so it's a duty of the company to give back to the society also. So suppose you have a factory in a region, so you should also think of building schools, building hospitals in that region, because you are getting so many things from the community. So it is very close to what we call as the CSR, the corporate social responsibility. It's very close to that, right? So this model was propagated by the World Economic Forum, that we should move towards that, so that the inequality in the world will be reduced and capitalism will be saved. Similarly, this 4P model of capitalism, which focuses on profit, people, planet and purpose. Planet means environmental sustainability. People means the whole people in the society. Profit is something which, any capitalist unit is motivated by profit. And purpose, it should have a goal that, for what it is operating. Similarly, we need to improve the state of agriculture in India, because agriculture still employs 48 to 49% of the people, and therefore if we can focus on R&D, if we can focus on food processing, if we can focus on building good infrastructure, rural infrastructure, if we can promote this e-NAM and all this go, and also MSP for all the products, all of this will go a long way in improving the incomes of the Indian farmers, and therefore the inequality will also reduce. Similarly, the employment oriented growth. So as Niti Aayog also highlighted, that there are certain sectors like apparel sector, leather, cotton textile. These sectors have a lot of capability of promoting jobs at mass level, and this will actually also go a long way in reducing inequality. Has China been able to reduce inequality in last 40 years since its economic reform in 1980? Yes, China may even, the situation is even worse than India. The Gini coefficient, which measures inequality in a society, the Chinese Gini coefficient is even more than that. Actually, in China, it's more about regional inequality. In China, majority of the industries and their towns are, or their prosperous towns are in the southern part of China, which is close to Hong Kong and all, Shenzhen and all, Shenzhen, Shanghai. जो उनका ईस्टर्न पार्ट है, सॉरी ईस्टर्न नहीं, वेस्टर्न पार्ट है, एंड उनका जो सदर्न पार्ट है, ऑल ऑफ दैट आर वेरी बैकवर्ड, एंड दैट इज व्हाई यू हैव दिस ऑल दिस थिंग गोइंग ऑन इन ईस्टर्न, सॉरी वेस्टर्न पार्ट, दिस Xinjiang region and all, right? Similarly, we should also focus on tax efficiency in India. So that can only be done when we reduce the threshold limit, and also we reduce exemptions, and we make the whole regime very simpler, right? Because in India we are mostly reliant on indirect tax, and indirect tax further increases inequality in India. So we need to focus upon direct tax reform. Similarly, the state has to be the dominant provider of merit goods. What are demerit goods and what are merit goods? ये सब प्री में पूछ सकते हैं यार. गुटखा, cigarettes, alcohol, diesel, and merit goods which have positive externalities. It's based on externality. Have you heard about the term externality? बेसिक वो नहीं पढ़ी क्या इकोनॉमिक्स अभी तक? बेसिक इकोनॉमिक्स पढ़ो भाई साथ साथ. यू हैव टू रीड द बेसिक इकोनॉमिक्स जो आपके एनसीईआरटीज हैं, because that is something which will not be taught in this Samachar Manthan series, that you have to read yourself. So externality is what? Suppose I am if I am healthy, if let's talk about vaccine, if I am vaccinated, there is a less chance of me transferring virus to another person. That is what we call as positive externality, right? If I am educated, I can contribute more to the society because I am more skilled. That is positive externality. Suppose there is a factory which has opened in an area that is polluting, right? And that is polluting whom? That is polluting those people जिनका उस फैक्ट्री से कोई लेना देना नहीं है. Those who are residents of the region. So that is what we call as negative externality. So gutka, cigarette, all of them have negative externality. Why? Because there is a chance that you will get unhealthy. And when you will get unhealthy, it will be burden on the healthcare of the country, right? So therefore, government throughout the world imposes tax on that. On the other hand, health, education, these are all known to give positive externality, right? So therefore, they are not taxed by the government. So states should play a dominant role in providing healthcare and education, because if states don't play a dominant role, then what will happen? We will have private healthcare and private education, and the food will be sold in a market. Usse kya hoga? That will lead to exclusion, because not everybody will be able to afford that, and that will further promote inequality in the country. ठीक है ना? Similarly, it should also prevent deprivation. So we should ensure कि जो Forest Rights Act है, जो Land Acquisition Act है, all of them are implemented in letter and spirit.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon on the YouTube app and never miss another update from Civil's Daily.